So I'd like to kind of give a high-level overview of what our integration with object storage extension really means and what it defines. So as I illustrated earlier, Cloudian is an object storage clustered system, and it's heavily integrated into VMware Cloud Director. So for those managed service providers, what this really looks like, right, is we embed HyperStore at the provider level. And what that looks like is essentially grabbing the cluster, integrating it with VMware Cloud Director, and creating this connection. So you see all these API-driven type endpoints are all integrated with VMware Cloud Director. So once you load up a tenant into your VMware Cloud Director, they're all separated by what we call a storage tenant ID. And these tenant ID is how we can do billing, metering, and charge your tenants for their services, what they consume on a monthly basis, right? So the advantage of including all this, it's multi-tenancy based, and every single tenant has no idea of their tenancy. So, you know, MSP1 will know about MSP2 and so forth, right? So this integration, once you, for example, you go into one of these tenants, once they're loaded into the object storage system, it automatically maps all that stuff into the object storage cluster. So once the tenant is fully loaded, they would essentially are already provisioned object storage and they can use it at will. So I'm going to actually log in as what a tenant will look like. So let's go into, I'm going to actually use MSP2 today for this demonstration. So I'm going to actually go into the tenant view, and we're going to actually log in here as MSP2. And MSP2 admin, which is the organization administrator for this tenant group. So when you log in here, for those who are familiar with VMware Cloud Director, one of my favorite products, to be honest with you guys. But as you see here, these are virtual data centers. And these virtual data centers come into play with the object storage extension because you can have vApps, you can have Kubernetes, and you can have catalogs and libraries and so forth. So when we go into the object storage extension, and what that really defines is, here is a tenant, and we have provisioned, object storage for them to use for their services, right? So when you log in, you can actually go into the buckets and essentially see what a bucket view looks like. And one thing I'd like to emphasize as a tenant is this metadata. And in the VMware context, what we see here is this metadata called, vApps, or you have catalogs. It starts to actually associate the bucket level with whatever category you're invoking or orchestrating in your VMware or VCD context. So to take a step back, if we look, for example, vApps, I have a vApp here, and we have an OVA, and that OVA pertains to the vApp, right? So that actually is stored into a bucket, and the beauty of all this is all automated into the object storage extension. So here's a catalog, and if you had a catalog, you can upload your ISOs. For example, here I have I have a Ubuntu ISO. It's also part of my catalog, and I can offer it to my VDCs and can pull and extract this data. Now, one thing that's very important, as Veeam was mentioning, I was mentioning, was ransomware. And I would like to emphasize on this bucket called MSP2L, and I named it MSP2L for object lock. And if I go into this bucket, we have actually enabled a functionality called object lock. And object lock is actually fully integrated into the object storage extension. So when you're looking at this definition of properties, you essentially can see every single metadata tag or parameter that has been invoked for this bucket. And one thing I like to also emphasize, this is all done from the single pane of glass. You do not need to leave BCD to invoke any of these actions. You have all these permissions. So if you wanted to do ACLs for the tenants within that group, you can also leverage that as well. You can also add policies, and some customers leverage what we call lifecycle policies. For those that are familiar with AWS's lifecycle policies, the same type cloud platform topologies that you can invoke in these public hyperscalers are also included in the object storage extension, right? So if you wanted to actually make a new rule or expire these objects, you could do so at will. So that really, at a high level, includes what the object storage extension depicts, and what it can illustrate for managed service providers providing sovereign cloud and adhering to these laws and regulations. It also is a very intricate methodology to also include Veeam into this play, right? It's all one giant workflow. So this same bucket that I have also illustrated to the audience, MSP2L, is the same bucket that we're also protecting these VDCs. And as you see here on the right-hand side, this is called MSP2 SOBAR, or Scalar Object Backup Repository in the Veeam context. And for those that are really familiar with Veeam, to create a SOBAR, you need a block level device to create a performance tier. And you also need a capacity tier, which is the object lock, a bucket to provide object lock if you wanted to create immutability. So what I'd like to showcase here is that the same bucket that was provisioned for your tenant, they also have access to see every single Veeam archive that's going into their ecosystem, right, in their workflow. So we've actually set up a bucket with immutability with object lock. And one thing I like to showcase here is that we have set the immutability for 30 days. Now, one thing to take in fact here is that the immutability is actually manipulated by Veeam. Veeam ensures that they adhere to the immutability. So all you have to do on the object storage side, you set up the object lock, and then you set up the immutability retention policies. For example, here we're using the default of 30 days. And this allows Veeam to essentially make sure that you cannot delete any objects within that bucket within 30 days, right? So as you see here, I'm going to take a step back out of here, and we've created a SOBAR. And this SOBAR is what pertains to this tenant. And I'm actually going to go into the Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager. I have Andy here as well, who can also talk more in detail about the integration as well. So I'm going to go into the self-service portal. And to also illustrate here that we're using the same SOBAR that has the performance tier and the bucket level with object lock enabled has also been integrated into the Veeam Backup Manager, right? So as you see here, this MSP2 SOBAR has been integrated and assigned to my tenant MSP2. So coincides, and the reason why I'm showing this, you guys can see the relationship between the SOBAR and the integration, so our tenants can use the SOBAR. So, Andy, I'll turn it to you if you want to talk about these menus and features.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Phil. Hey, everybody. My pleasure. Yeah. So one of the great things that Phil mentioned about Cloudian and about Veeam when it comes to Cloud Director is it's all integrated in with the tenant. Excuse me, on this side is we're looking more at the administrative settings. And one of the things we want to make sure that partners can offer to their customers is flexibility when it comes to at what tier or level would you like to give your customers backup permissions. Meaning if you would offer a plan or a service where customers would have full capabilities to modify and create backups, if you want them to do that, or if you wanted to be a little more restrictive, where let's say you want the customer to know what's going on in the environment, so you can give them a little bit more of a read-only permission. As Phil kind of hit here in the drop down, these are typically the most settings that you choose from. So if you would want to give them full access, if you want them only to be able to create like a daily and a monthly job, and then there are a couple of things with deny. So not giving them the ability to create like a randomized backup window. And then also above that, you're able to set quotas on the particular backup storage. So depending on what a customer would say pay for, you could set a quota of, in this case, 100 gigabytes, which that's pretty small, right? It's just a demo, but you could set quotas there as well. And then on the right, on the right-hand side there, so you could kind of see what those advanced job settings are, what's enabled for that particular org.
Okay.
Yep. And then so once we get more onto the tenant side, I'm sure we'll get to that, Phil. We can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Absolutely. So I'm going to move into back to the so data protection with Veeam, the plugin, and I'll let Andy continue his demonstration here. So if Andy, if you want to go over a bit of over these tabs.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep in mind here, Phil is logged in as the MSP2 admin for this particular organization. So the great thing about this is that the way we integrate with Cloud Director, it's a single sign-on. So they log into Cloud Director, and when they hit the drop down for the particular for the Veeam plugin, right here is where you can start to really dive into and see what's going on without leaving. So the first tab we want to talk about is our dashboard. I think that's kind of pretty self-explanatory. Kind of gives you an overview of where things are at within the last 24 hours or 7 days. A customer can come in here and see where they're at, maybe with their quota, how the throughput's going, if there's something that's maybe failed or a backup job that's has a problem, they can kind of dive into this and see it at a little high level overview. And then the next tab is our jobs tab. So if a customer has the capabilities with permissions you give them, here they can go and see what existing backup jobs they have. They can go in and look at those. They can create a new backup job. So it's basically like a simplified version of scheduling backups. But yeah, you can go in here and see what's happened within the last 24 hours of a particular job. You know, some of these have warnings, but that could be something simple. If you wanted to, you could go there and take a look at it. That's kind of where we're at with our jobs. But if you go back to that jobs tab, Phil, and if you wanted to say create, so anyone who's seen Veeam in a normal GUI UI, it's pretty much the same thing. It just looks a little different, but a customer can go in and specify a particular vApp or a virtual machine within their organization. They can choose when they want to run it. They can choose if they want to do guest processing, and they can then even specify who should be notified if the backups are successful or a failure. So pretty straightforward. Like I said, much like you've seen on typical Veeam, that's the backup jobs tab. So the next one is the VMs tab. And like I said, keep in mind, we're still all within the tenant. We haven't left, right? So these are where you can see what virtual machines have restore points. So things that basically are being protected. So on the left-hand side, you can see those virtual machines, what vApp they're associated with, the job name, and then over on the right-hand side, you can even see how many restore points and when the last successful one was. So if you would select one of these, you could then choose to, up at the top, you can restore the virtual machine. Overwrite means we're just going to overwrite the virtual machine that's if it's currently there. So let's say something happened and a machine blew up and you would just want to overwrite what's there. That'll do that. Keep is the option where you want to restore it possibly as a different name. So you're going to have the original and then a new one. And then the same thing for the next one over when it comes to restore vApp. So that first one was just VM specific, but this one would include all of the configuration associated with a virtual machine, with the vApp itself. And then the next one is delete. That's just, hey, you want to delete it. And then you can, the next one is if you wanted to pick a particular virtual disk from a backup. So you could, let's say a D drive or a data drive of a virtual machine needed to be restored, but not the entire machine. This option would give you that. So here you can see Phil's kind of going in and you can be able to look at what disk mappings are there for a particular virtual machine. Might just take a minute here. Yep. So it'll give you even like the SCSI controller, the VMDK information, if there's a storage policy associated with it. And then that's fine. You can just cancel this. This is no big deal. But then if you wanted to go through, you could even do what we mentioned earlier, where Dale talked about more of that intrinsic security. One of the things in there that Veeam offers is called Secure Restore. And essentially what that does is let's say that you had a ransomware attack and you have essentially remediated it from your production, and you're ready to put that virtual machine back from a backup into production. Well, how do you know if the VM itself had some malicious files or things in it still living that, if reintroduced in the environment, you'd rinse repeat, right? So our secure restore option allows you to integrate it in with one of our 5, I believe it's 5, but essentially it could be any one you want of a antivirus or a malware partner. And then you would scan that backup. And then in the event it found something, you're presented with a couple of options. One, you could say, hey, go ahead and restore it, but don't connect the network. Or 2, I'm just going to completely abort this and let's pick another date. So it's another layer of protection when it comes to getting the restore back into your environment. Okay. Yep. Go ahead and cancel out of that. The next one is files. So now this is another great value add from a provider perspective to give to your customers. So this essentially allows a customer to come in and say, hey, you know what? I need this one particular file from last Wednesday's presentation. Dale accidentally deleted it and we need it back. So here a customer could go pick a particular virtual machine from a specific point in time. So you can kind of see Phil's got the calendar up here. You can pick that restore point and then you can click mount. And then what that does is, in the background, it actually mounts that virtual machine to the point where you can drill through and look at the directory structure, which we're going to see here in just a minute.
Yeah, and just in the context of like a sovereign boundary, right? So
yes,
in this environment, we've got like Cloudian within the sovereign environment, right? So we're not going outside of that air-gapped environment at all. And when we're doing these restores and these loads of or mounts of disks, this is all still happening within the sovereign cloud boundary, right? So it's
absolutely correct.
100% safe. Yeah.
Yep. Everything's still within the boundaries of sovereign. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you picked a particular file, you can choose to restore it. You can do the same overwrite that you would want. And but one of the cool things you can also do, you can even select the download option. So if you didn't want to put it back into the virtual machine, but you wanted to download it, you can actually just download it right through your browser if you needed the file that way, right? So if it was something that was like that presentation that we accidentally deleted and we needed it back, but we didn't want to put it in the VM and then get it back out of the VM, we can just download it directly and we have it. So pretty straightforward. And then this is showing an example of any type of restore histories that we had. So from a file level recovery option, it's like I said, a great value add for providers to add to give to their customers. Keep in mind, we still haven't left the Cloud Director tenant all in there. And then the last thing I want to talk about, because I know we're kind of running short on time here, is the items tab. So essentially, we don't have any database for the demo, but I'm just going to talk about it. So keep in mind, it's sort of like the files tab, except now we're able to specify a specific database, whether that's SQL or Oracle. And then we can pick a point in time. There's like a little slider there on the right. We can scrub through and find the time of what we want. And we're able to restore a table or a field or anything like that that you might have to the original location or to an alternative location. So that was a feature that we added the items tab within the new version 11 plugin. And to get this all started and get it installed, it's just off the installation media. If you're a provider, you go into Cloud Director and say, add a plugin, and you're on your way. So that's just kind of a quick overview of how Veeam comes into play when providing the recovery options in that sovereign cloud.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. And if anybody wants to see the Veeam plugin, just to for the demo, I can actually show that real quick. It won't take too long. It's very easy to install. So as Andy mentioned, right, you download the plugin from your Veeam ISO or your installation media, and then you essentially just upload the plugin to your portal. And here it is. So very integrated, as Andy mentioned. I deployed it really easily. It was instantaneously. You upload it, and as long as you have VBR, Veeam backup, you should be golden, right? Very seamless.
Brilliant. So from a cloud provider admin perspective, right, we've seen the admin steps here: load the plugin, configure the object storage, configure the Veeam connection. In Veeam, set up your scale out repository and link it all together. And then really you're then just deciding what offering you want to give to which tenants and what tiers of service you want to provide. And from the tenant's perspective, they never have to leave Cloud Director. So it's a really, really nice, easy solution for them, giving them, like we said, right, that secure protection against ransomware. And that's really great that you can actually just also do that extra step of getting the VM scanned as well, or the vApps scanned. That's a nice extra feature I hadn't seen.
Absolutely.
Okay, Phil, is there anything else to show? Because we're coming up to time here.
I think that's it. One thing I do want to, with my last remarks, for those customers that want to grab the S3 endpoint as well, one thing I want to showcase really quickly is you can grab your tenant's S3 endpoint and plug into any S3 compliant client. So as you see here, I'm actually connecting to the MSP2 tenant that we were showcasing earlier, and we're able to see the same buckets, right? We're manipulating. So you don't have to do everything within the OSC context. And the advantage of this is while you're using the same endpoint, right, it's the same consumption model, right, is the billing and metrics that are built in specifically with Cloudian, right? There's actually a section on that we just released with VMware on billing and metrics that's integrated into the tenant app. So I highly advise for those on the call to definitely read up on that. It's a new feature that just came out that's only with Cloudian and VMware Cloud Director.